else you might be able to do. You can also sign up for free weekly watering advice custom to your location. So if you live in Aledo, for instance, or if you live in Arlington, or if you live in Fort Worth, or wherever it may be, and they can help you to decide based on technology the best way to water for your location. Lots of calendar of events and classes. Again, they've been a wonderful partner with the Tarrant County Master Gardeners for many, many years and doing some wonderful things. They also have a great deal of water saving tips and videos. So SaveTarrantWater.com, go there and sign up and they can help you. All right. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the things, that we need to think about when we look at our landscape, when we're doing gardens or lawns or wherever. And that's the 7 basics of all landscape designs: planting and design, soil analysis, appropriate plant selections, practical turf area, efficient irrigation, use of mulches, and appropriate maintenance. And that's where I've been in this industry for many, many years, and we see the biggest thing that we see as a problem is that people don't take the time to plan what they're doing. They just happen to be at one of the nurseries or one of the box stores or at a farmer's market, and they find some wonderful value on some plants. And so they buy some plants and they come home and they say, okay, now where am I going to put them? So a lot of times they don't get planted, they get put in the wrong place. They're not sited well. So planning and designing can be a big, important part of it. Soil analysis to know what type of soils you have. In Tarrant County alone, we have 77 different soil types. That's a lot, going from blow sand to heavy black gumbo clay and everywhere in between. So I always advise people anytime we do a talk is to, if you've not done one, go ahead and do a soil analysis on your yard, whether it be your vegetable garden, be your flower beds, it be where your trees and shrubs are, it be your lawn, whatever it may be, so that you know where you are and you know what kind of things it needs, what kind of nutrients, what kind of pH and everything. So for those of you that are curious, it's real simple. Go to soilsampled.com or soilsampled.tamu.edu, and you can do it really quick and really inexpensive through A&M Soil Lab. Appropriate plant selections. I think we all saw some big issues this last few month or so when we had the snow Mageddon. That a lot of our plants were not properly appropriate for our areas. Practical turf areas. Do you really need as much turf as you have? I was driving by some houses over the weekend, with acres and acres of turf, and I bet you they don't have any children or any need for all those acres, but they're still watering them. So that's a huge water sink. Efficient irrigation. It hadn't rained in a while, but every time you go anywhere, it's rainy. You always see people irrigating because they're not aware that it's on, because it goes early in the morning. Use of mulches. That's one of the biggest things that we can do to conserve water and make our landscape better and make our everything that we're growing better is mulch it. Too often people say, okay, I'll buy into the mulch idea and I'll mulch it. And then you go back in a year and you say, well, what happened to your mulch? And they say, I don't know, it's all disappeared. And so I'm not going to do it again. Well, that's good, because when it disappeared, it broke down into your soil and enriched your soil. And then obviously appropriate maintenance. My neighbor house to the side of me just sold. A young 23-year-old couple bought it, and it was their first house. And they got outside and in the yard, and I happened to talk to them for a minute, and they said, this is our first house, and we don't know anything about maintaining it. They bought a house with a pool. They've never maintained a pool, don't know anything about that, don't know anything about the irrigation system. So knowing something about your maintenance or how you're going to do it or who's going to do it for you is very, very important. All right, Snowmageddon 2021. I've been bombarded with questions, and most of my colleagues are now ex-colleagues Since I retired, I've been bombarded with the same ones. But what do? Is it everything dead? Do I lose everything? Do I cut it down? Do I remove it? What do I do? So, the thing is, before freeze, you want to cover it up. They have seed and frost blanket that's available at a lot of nurseries. You can get it online and just simply go out and put it over your plants. It'll help control the freeze issue and save a lot of plants from dying. So the question is it dead? If I had $1 for every person that asked me that in the last month, I'd be a millionaire. Most of the things out there are not. If you give them a little bit of time, a little bit of patience, I think you'll see a lot of them coming back. Yes, there are a few that are clearly dead. Some of the agaves, some of the succulents, just melted. Yes. A few of the palm trees that are not really well sited for our areas are probably dead. But a lot of them are still coming back. I saw some the other day, or they're just putting out a little bit of green. So, give them a little bit of more time. Neil Sperry came out with an article the other day, and he said, give them at least till May 1st to see what's going to come back. So that's what I would recommend. It may be dormant. It may have dropped it into a dormancy state, and that can make a big difference. So don't get in a big hurry to cut it back. Hardy perennials will go into a dormant state. Their tops might look like they're damaged, but they're very much alive and will flourish again the next season. So here's kind of an example. I think everybody knows the tropical giant spider lily. It's a great plant. It's fun. It has good color. But that's what most of them look like, after the freeze, especially if they didn't get covered up. It's all wilted and you think, yeah, I lost everything. But if you just give it a little bit of time, you'll see that it'll pop back in most cases. The leopard plant, great plant, a lot of fun color, brilliant foliage. That's what most of them look like after the freeze. But again, it won't take long before it starts putting out new growth. And you'll have it again looking like the bottom pretty quick. And these are just a few of the plants I wanted to show you. Wood fern, a lot of the ferns are the same thing. They're beautiful plants, they're shade plants. They do really well. But this is like what the ones in my front yard look like right now. But if you give them, don't get too carried away. Just cut all the dead back like that, and then you'll see some new growth in the next 30 days. So patience is very, very important. So cut to ground some of the perennials out there, purple coneflower, black-eyed Susan, ox-eye daisy, summer phlox, daylilies, some of your Mexican bush sage, Mexican mint marigold. Most of your salvia can be cut back all the way, because it got burnt a little bit and got some injury, but it'll come right back and you'll never know you're missing it. Russian sage, lantana, zexmania, loosestrife, flame acanthus, cadmia, bee balm, purple heart, cannas, Turk's cap, datura, elephant's ear, dwarf Mexican petunia, wood fern, Japanese painted fern, hostas. All of those are wonderful perennials that do great in our landscape, but they just don't take the hard freeze, and they just go dormant. So don't worry too much about them. Here's a couple of things. Salvia greggii, give it a slight haircut now to tidy it up. But most of the heavy pruning should have been done. I did mine actually a week before the freeze. I cut them all of them down to 6 inches tall and 6 inches wide. So there wasn't much to freeze. The root system was heavily mulched, so it didn't have any big issues. Fall asters, the same thing. Ornamental grasses, after a good hard freeze, now they're starting to green up. Go ahead and give them a good pruning. Butterfly bush, American beauty bush, roses. Again, now all of that can be cut down and get ready for a big flush of new growth. Here's some dormant on your hydrangeas, and that's what they look like right now. They are wilted and they look pretty sad. But don't worry about them; they'll come right back. Some of the evergreens, look bad, but they're not dead. Again, patience. In a few weeks, if not already, they should be popped back up and full again. Hey, you might got a little bit of burn. You might got a few black leaves, but nothing really to worry about. Fall to-do list. These are some of the things that you should have done this last fall, and I wanted to remind you of those. Oops, went too far. They get your pre-emergence out for the spring weed control. That we've got a lot of weeds out there. So those are the things that would have been a pre-emergent on Labor Day area. And so that comes out. And now, back in Valentine's Day or somewhere right about now, we're putting out pre-emergence again for early summer weed control. So if you can get on a good program of weed control, that will help take care of a big portion of your problems, just simply using the pre-emergent so that you don't have to go back and do post-emergent and a lot of other issues. Turf, we talk about turf. We've got way too much in a lot of our areas. And, some of you may say, no, I got just the right amount, or I've got good turf. And that's great, but it takes a lot of water. There's a big article in Las Vegas. They wanted to ban turf completely in any area that wasn't used, like medians and things like that, because of the heavy water use. So if you want some turf, that's great. Choose the right turf for your area. We have 3 basic different types of turf. We have Bermuda, we have the common and the hybrids. The common Bermuda is the one that's been around forever. You cut it at 2.5, 3 inches. It's really happy. It doesn't take much water. It doesn't take much fertilization. We'll keep out most of the weeds out. And in the middle of the summer, if we get into a long, drawn-out drought, it just simply goes dormant. And it browns up, and then a few weeks later, when the fall rains come, it greens right back up, so you don't have to worry about it. If you want some of the hybrids, that are out there now, there's a tremendous amount of them that do really well, and they will give you, all kinds of color. You can cut them in all different levels. If you want a putting green, or whatever you might want. So you can do anywhere now. They have some that you cut down as low as 1/4 inch, and they grow back. But then the problem, if you cut them at 1/4 inch, you got to cut them every other day. Or they've got some the ones that you cut at 2.5 or 3 inches. So it's up to you. But it's the least water use. It's the least fertilizer use. It's the least pesticide use. And it's so it's the most economical for our area. Zoysia would be the next one, Japonica or Matrella, and that's simply the ones that came from Japan or the ones that came from Manila. They have different colors, they have different blade types, and they do really well. They'll take up quite a bit of shade, a lot more shade than the Bermuda, but they also will take a full amount of sun. And they don't use near as much water or near as much pesticides or herbicides or any of those kinds of issues. And then last but not least, we have St. Augustine. A lot of people still love their St. Augustine, and that's great. It's a good grass. It just takes the most water. It has the most pest, and it has the most issues with it. A lot of people from the freeze lost their St. Augustines, already dead. Every year we have people lose it from that. So, if you're thinking about going a different way, look at Bermuda or Zoysia. If you're getting ready to build a new house, please don't do St. Augustine. There are a lot better choices. All right, the right tools are probably the most important thing that you can do when you're trying to make sure that you get a good lawn or you get a good fun landscape or whatever that you're trying to do. And so think about that. And the next time you get ready to do something, do you have all the right tools that you need? So one of the important things I think is knowing the insect issues, is knowing the good guys. With the freeze, luckily we got a lot of the insects got knocked out, so we shouldn't have as big an issue as we normally have the last few years. But you never know. So here I wanted to kind of quickly remind you of a few of the good ones. Everybody knows the green lacewing. It eats aphids and just all day long. But this is the infant stage or the egg stage of the green lacewing. Looks like a piece of filament with a little cotton ball on the end. A lot of people can confuse it with spider eggs or different things. So you see something like that, don't rub it off. Don't try to spray it. Don't try to do anything with it, or else you're not going to have any green lacewings. Then when I was at the office, everybody called every spring and they said, I have this ugly black beetle. It's got beige on the outside and got horns on the front. How do I kill it? Well, that's the larva stage of the green lacewing. So if you kill those, you don't have any green lacewings either. So here's the green lacewing. If you're not familiar with it, it's a wonderful little insect. Again, eats its 2 or 3 times its weight in aphids every single day. The Ichneumon wasp, here is a tomato hornworm. All those little cotton balls are the eggs. So they parasitize other insects and lay their eggs on there. The insect carries the eggs until they're ready to pupate, and then they're gone. They blow up, and so no more tomato hornworm. That's what the Ichneumon wasp looks like. It's parasitizing some aphids there. So just because it's a wasp, don't go out and kill them. Don't look out for a wasp prey. Praying mantis, a big prehistoric. We've got so many calls every year. Got this huge prehistoric looking green bug that looks like it's about to jump on me. They're a neat bug. They're fun to watch, but they eat aphids all day long. So we don't want to get rid of those. Everybody knows the ladybugs. They eat aphids as you're going out of style and all kinds of other insects. But what a lot of people don't know is there's that beetle again, that pesky beetle. That's the larva stage. Yeah, it's a little more colorful, a little prettier than that other one, but it's still a great big large beetle, and people get scared. Earthkind was the banner program of extension horticulture. And so we tried to put all those things together, knowing the 7 things of landscape design, knowing about irrigation, knowing about insects and all those things. But one of the biggest things is that you have to add some compost to your soil and make sure it's fully composted. And if it's not, you'll know, because you should be able to pick it up and smell it. And it should have a nice woodsy smell. It should not have a rank smell. You only add compost once into your soil unless it's a vegetable garden. And then you just keep on mulching. And the mulch turns into the compost, and it keeps enriching the soil, gives it, helps conserve water, gives it more food, and then you just mulch right back over the top of it. So again, compost once, mulch forever. Gardening tips: when we start gardening, now we've got all the other stuff out of the way. I suggest to people, keep it simple. Don't get too carried away. You don't have to plant the entire yard all one time. Make sure that you can take care of it. Make sure you can water it. Maintain a very patient and tolerant attitude, because Mother Nature will throw you some curveballs every once in a while, just like you did with the freeze. Plan some activities for delayed and some for immediate gratification. So, that's the delayed is like planting bulbs and things like that. You plant them, you don't see them, and they come up later as a delayed gratification. But you may want to plant some annuals to give you that immediate gratification. So to keep that in mind, and the main thing is to maintain an open mind. Gardening can be fun, but in North Central Texas, it's always a little bit difficult. I saw that at the Botanic Garden years and years ago, and it always reminds me of gardening so much, because so many people want to garden, but they don't want to listen to you. when you give them ideas. They, they don't want to see anything. They just want to do what they want to do. So, bare bones, basic elements of an essential structure or something. Garden bones consist of these things that give the structure and the height and the depth and bring interest to your garden. It doesn't always have to be a flower. It doesn't always have to be a tree. It can be a lot of other things. It can be permanent structures. It can be trees. It can be evergreen shrubs. It can be walkways, paths, ponds, fountains, statuary, trellises, gazebos, benches. A lot of those things are permanent structures. They're hardscape. But the nice thing about them is the freeze doesn't hurt them, and you don't have to feed them or water them. So I just put a few out here just to kind of give you some ideas. Here's the disappearing fountains are becoming very, very popular. And that's just simply a fountain that comes up, makes the noise. You see the water, and it goes right back down into a circle or a catchment, and then it's recycled. So you waste very little water. It's very fun to play in, to see, and to hear as a part of your landscape. You see all the things in the back, all kinds of color and textures and height, but then you also have the fun part of the water. We just got through the fall and now we're going into spring, but wildflowers, they can always be fun. They're coming up now, we're enjoying them. But then we've got to start thinking here in another month or two, how do we get those wildflowers to come up for the next year? We got too crazy spraying pre-emergence or doing different things or cutting back things at the wrong time. We may not have any wildflowers. So keep that in mind. Wildflowers are important and fun, but you need to know what to do with them. Bluebonnets, the bluebonnets are coming up. They say it's going to be one of the best years ever because of the way the freeze was a big thing. And a lot of things, freeze hurts and can cause damage, but with bluebonnets, they have a hard seed coat on it. They have to have X amount of freeze. And so that was actually the perfect thing for all of our bluebonnets this year. Larkspur, another fun one. California poppies, those are some fun things, they're coming up. So anyway, here's some more water features. Look at some water features, but again, as the forefront of what you got, but then look at the magnolias in the back, look at the camellias, look at all of the different plants that are giving you foliage color. They're giving you blossoms. They're giving you texture. They're giving you height. But also, if you look over to the far right, instead of having turf there, you've got some nice ground cover that's easy to maintain and doesn't take as much water. This is one of my favorite parts of the Japanese garden, at the Botanic Garden. As you walk around a corner, then you come up on this little bitty fountain. It's a big hole they carved in a rock, and it just trickles out. And the whole idea of the Japanese garden is to catch your attention. And that's why there's so many circles. There's very few straight lines in Japanese garden, so that as you walk around the edge of something and do a curve, then you find something new to capture your attention. And that's kind of what we do in our landscapes. We want to have something as we go from one part of the yard to another that stops you, catches your attention, makes you pay attention. Ornamental grasses are wonderful. You don't have to water them. You don't have to feed them. You don't have to spray insecticides. You don't have to do much of anything except enjoy them. We have hundreds and hundreds of varieties of ornamental grasses, from 6 inches tall to well over 12 feet tall. And so you can choose something anywhere in between. You may want to use a combination of them. We got some, beautiful things there that give you some color. We got bulbs, we got annuals, we got ground cover, all those things combined, plus the evergreen backing or the screen, to give you a beautiful landscape. got some crepe myrtles back in the back. So all kinds of fun things to think about. The vertical garden is another fun way of doing it, especially if you have a small yard. And that's things growing vertical. We're seeing a lot of that overseas in some of the countries where they have a lot more population and they have land or places to grow things. And that's simply growing something vertically up on a wall. And here's a really good example, I think. It's simply a big brick wall that was really bare, and they needed something to do, so they created a vertical garden to plant annuals. And I think it's really interesting. You can do vegetables, you can do annuals, you can do herbs, you can do whatever you want to. But, you know, from a distance, you look over there, and that's about 6 by 6, and it's very striking. So something different to think about. If you're interested, read up a little bit on vertical gardening. You can do vegetables, you can do herbs, you can do flowers. In a minute, we'll even show you how to do trees. Water features, again, can be fun. As we start looking, we talked about more hardscape. That's part of the walkway. They put a water feature inside that. And then they have all kinds of plants growing out of it. So that's in plants growing around it. So it can be a focal point of your landscape. It can be a fun way to do it that doesn't take a lot of work. Here's another fun one. Here is a combination of plants together. So we have Joseph's coat on one side and Joseph's coat on the other side. One is the yellow variety. The other one is the green variety. And in the middle, we have the pink wax begonia. And that's always been the fun thing, I think, is to use a combination of materials that complement each other. Here's a vertical, and we talked a little bit a minute ago about vertical gardening. So here's a way to grow trees vertically, and that's called espalier, or growing them flat against a wall, growing them flat on a trellis, whatever it may be. If you don't have a lot of room, or you want to really make something jump out at you, trellis something up. It can be an apple tree, it can be a redbud, it could be a magnolia, it can be just about anything you can think of, and simply keeping it pruned flat up against something. It can be really striking. You can grow, there's an orchard owned by a master gardener years ago, and she did all of her dwarf apple trees all espaliered, and this had row after row after row of them, made them easy to pick, easy to take care of. There's kind of a close-up of it so you can see what it looks like and how you might use a different kind of tree. Here at the bottom, that big knot, that's where it's grafted. So here's the parent stock here, and here's the grafted top that's actually put on, and then here's the graft union here. It doesn't always have to be tremendous amount of flowering. It can be foliage color, it can be sizes. So here's you got purples and dark purples and blacks and greens and yellows, and got some flower in the back, but the foliage can be a wonderful addition to your garden. You don't have to deadhead as much, and it just, I think, is very striking. So don't think everything has to flower. Look at the color in the foliage, and it can be really fun. We're starting to see a lot more people using the weeping tree. So instead of having so much going 60 or 70 feet up, having something that goes up 5 or 6 or 8 feet and then weeps over. And so that can be a lot of fun. I think that's a weeping mulberry there. They have weeping Japanese maples. They have weeping crab apples. They have weeping red buds. Just about everything you can possibly think of. Weeping Yopon hollies that can really be nice for a smaller, maybe a 0 lot line or a smaller yard, or something that you want to be able to take care of easily. There's a close-up of it, especially if you have kids or grandkids, they love to crawl underneath things. And so with that weeping there, it makes a perfect fort for them to get underneath and enjoy it. Here's some bright colors. There's some purple fountain grass. Might have a little bit of yard art with a scarecrow or whatever in there. So, you got the combination of colors and movement. As we all know, we got plenty of wind in Texas. So you got movement of the grasses. You got the bright color of the purple, and then you got all the flowers of the different things there. We're starting to see a lot of people starting to use trains in their landscape. People that their hobby was always trains, putting them outside. This is the one I took at Clark Gardens in Mineral Wells. And Mr. Clark was a railroad enthusiast. I see a couple smiles there. And he made a huge garden of nothing but different scales of railroads. And so you can have a lot of fun. Years ago, when I was still at Oklahoma State and as a graduate TA, we built one out on our demonstration garden, and we put where it circled the entire garden, and then came back and went into a storage shed. So we had a little door we flipped up, and you'd run it into the storage shed, and it had just enough room in there to go in and curl around. So keep it out of the weather, and then you put the little trap door down, and you didn't have to worry about it. So think about that if you're an enthusiast of trains. You can have all kinds of fun there. At the same time, using plant material. And the neat thing about it is by dwarfing everything, you're forcing yourself to go out and find newer dwarf plants that might work better for you in this particular situation. Scarecrows are always fun. There's a couple different ones there. The yard art, using your imagination. Your imagination's your only limit. So here is, a little bit of corn growing back in the back. Here's some millet growing. Doesn't always have to be a flower. It can be something that just gives you color. One of my favorite plants in an annual garden is giant red mustard. And so it's huge mustard leaves that, can be a foot or two by a foot or two that are the brilliant red color. So, something to think about. Again, hardscape, if you want to have a focal point in your garden, maybe a little hidden area for tea or a hidden area for the grandkids. Instead of having a normal table, maybe build one out of rock. Here's just some simple boulders that were put together to make a table and chair. Gives you all kinds of fun things, kind of secluded back there with some hostas and different things. That can make a fun area to get away to. This is again at the Botanic Garden. I take a lot of great clues. I worked with them for 16 years out there. And this was interesting, it's over by the Japanese garden. And what they did was they found a company that made headstones. And that's granite. That's pieces of granite. Instead of a headstone, it was all the cuts and the pieces that were left, and they had big piles of them. So the gardener at that time knew about it, he found it, and got them to donate it. Obviously, didn't have anything else to do with it, and he made a wonderful walkway. So that can be a memory. It can be something that's a focal point. It can be something that you maybe put in just for people to come when they come over to your house and look at your garden and remark and ask you questions. And you can kind of go, oh, yeah, I did that. It's all my idea. Different things there. Here's, using some flat rock and then using some smaller rock to make a design in it. We're seeing, instead of just the regular brown rocks and different things, we're starting to see a lot more gray and lighter gray and darker gray and black. in which can make a more conducive area in some of your gardens. Now you want to do just annuals. And annuals are great. You can do all kinds of different annuals. You change them out. It may be in a little raised bed like that, maybe in a container. I know one of our master gardeners does container gardening, and she does a wonderful talk on it. But if I remember right, last time she had 140 some odd containers in her yard, gardens that she did. So it can be a lot of fun, and it's, again, the imagination is your only limit. You can do raised beds. Raised beds are really great in our area. I was over by Lake Grapevine this weekend, and I drove by some houses alongside the lake, and they had all of their azaleas were in full bloom, and they were just gorgeous. But they had big, tall, they were under shade trees, big, tall raised beds that they'd obviously amended to make it acidic. And they had 6, 7, 8 foot azaleas that were rivaled anything you see in Tyler. So, raised beds can have a great impact on your garden. Some people just have no soil or have such poor soil, you can't do anything with it. For those of you who have not ever been out to the Master Gardener's demonstration garden at Resource Connection, it's a gorgeous garden we started 12, 13 years ago. But it's the entire garden is 2 acres, sets on about 2 inches of topsoil, and then the rest of it is solid rock. And so that's where this type of gardening really comes in handy. You can have a look like this if you like, which is wildflowers and native grasses, and or some people think that's a great look. Some people, it's too busy for them. It's not formal enough, and that's great. Whatever you like, and that's the thing that you got to remember. Your garden should reflect what you like and what you do. Hardscapes, again, here's some great arbors where you can have things growing over them, clematis, or you may have some type of a climbing rose. You may have whatever it may be that you want to climb over the top, or you may not have anything. You may just have hanging baskets to give you a place to have tons and tons of hanging baskets with a lot of great annuals. Here's my one, again, another one of my favorites is Turk's Cap. It's a great plant. Originally came in red. Then they came out with a yellow version, and they came out with a white version. Turk's Cap likes a little bit of shade, but it'll take tremendous amount of sun. Comes back year after year and just gets bigger and bigger. I don't do anything with my Turk's Cap. I planted a 1 6-inch pot years ago. It grows now up to 6 foot, and it's 6 foot wide. And then every year I have to dig up some because otherwise it'll take over the entire yard. But it's a great plant you might want to consider if you've never grown, and that's Turk's Cap. You might want to have a little fun if you got some big tall trees. You can't ever have enough yard art. Here's the faces that you put on the trees. Here on the right side here is some of the glass balls hanging down. Enjoy it if you have it. There's so much out there that can be added that you don't have to worry about watering it. Here's a close-up of it, and you can see the eyeball. I thought that was kind of fun. Potted plants, containers. Imagination is your limit on what you can grow. Everything that you see there is edible. And so that can be fun. Swiss chard, different colors of Swiss chard. When I say everything, there's some ground cover there that you probably don't want to eat. But you got the flowers here. You've got all kinds of things going on here and everywhere. So it can be a lot of fun. You got color, you got texture. You change them out if you want to or not. You can have it where it grows year round. Here's a kind of a close-up of it. You might want to have something in a climbing rose. that grow up over the top of an arbor so that you can walk underneath it, or an arch, or whatever it may be, to give you a striking focal point. So look at that. Look at things that will grow up vertically, so that you don't have to have them worry about them on the ground, and then they'll give you a little shade too. So often we don't have much shade in our areas in order to keep things growing. So it makes it a little more difficult. Ground cover, people called 100 times a year, and they said, "What new shade ground or turf do we have?" Because my trees are getting too big, and I don't want to cut them back, but it's shading out my grass. At some point, there is not enough, sun left to do anything except go to a ground cover. So go to, find a good ground cover that you like. There's all kinds of colors of them. There's all kinds of textures. But again, once they're planted, once they fill in, you don't have to do anything with them except enjoy them. So if we rocks, a few boulders in there, give it some interesting texture, and have some fun with it. Here's a close-up of the Asian jasmine. It's a great little ground cover. It'll grow in full sun. It'll grow in full shade. I even saw it growing up a wall one time. They put a trellis up on a wall and grew it up to cover the entire wall. You have, again, some water features. Here's something that's almost all perennials coming back, but then you got a water feature here in the forefront. It's kind of neat. You got a bird bath over here. And then the neat thing about it is you took out all that lawn that wasn't giving you anything. You still have lawn to walk on. You still have lawn to take your dog out. And you still have the lawn to keep things cool, but you reduced a little bit. And now you've got something that's giving you something year round, up to these tall ornamental grasses, to the color, to the foliage, something that's giving you some really beauty to your yard. Evergreens are great, because obviously during the winter when there's not much else growing, you've got the evergreens. But you also have things with berries, like this one, which is a possum haw holly. During the year, it's got kind of a light green foliage on it, but during the fall, and when everything goes away, you've got this light gray bark, and it's covered in red berries. So, it's a great fun one. It's a wonderful focal point for your garden. A lot of fun things you can do with it. You may just want bark texture. There's with the crepe myrtles, you've got all different ones that have cinnamon bark and exfoliating bark and everything here. And again, it can be a wonderful part during the fall and winter when there's not much else to see that beautiful texture. But again, remember, no crepe myrtle, no cutting the tops of it off. And no matter what you say or what anybody tells you, there's not a sound horticultural reason to ever do that. It's just not. It doesn't do anybody any good, and it just ruins it. Makes you're cutting away a lot of it, and you make these knobs on the top, and it takes away from the brilliance of the foliage. You may want bark. Some of the trees with the different kinds of bark: the heavy bark, the light bark, the purple bark, the gray bark. All different kinds of things. So to look at the bark might be an interesting part of your landscape. Boulders, little boulders, big boulders, river rock. Again, you don't have to water it, you don't have to feed it, you don't have to do anything except enjoy it. Then you can always get, the fun part, the eclectic part, the garden ornaments, the bottle trees, all the other different things out there. Again, imagination's your limit. If you get too much, it gets a little gaudy, but that's okay too. That might be your style. But everybody likes a little bit of garden art, especially like on this one where it says hope. Your hope that you're going to be out and enjoying your garden. Here's a few plants that I think are really do well in our area, and they add a lot of color. And so I thought I'd throw in a few of those. Nandinas. Again, knowing the varieties is very important, because when you look at all these different ones with foliage color, but then you get into the ones, the original Nandina domesticas and some of those that had the huge drupes of berries. The berries are very pretty, but anytime that you have bright colored berries, what's going to happen? The birds are going to find them. And when the birds find them, they come and eat them, and then they give them back to you in places that you don't want them. And so that's what makes them invasive. So you may want to look at, the ones that they bred the berries out that give you all of the brilliant colors, anywhere from purples to reds to oranges to yellows to greens, and everywhere in between, anywhere from 6 inches tall to 6 feet tall. But you don't have the berries. You don't have to worry about them. So they're evergreen, color year round. Once they're established, you don't water them, you don't feed them, you don't have to do anything to them except just sit back and enjoy them. Some of the ferns, if you've got enough shade, the holly ferns, the painted ferns, the Japanese ferns, the wood ferns, they're all wonderful plants. And they come back year after year and just get bigger and bigger. The one I always, every time I think about ferns, I always get a chuckle. Had a guy bring several pieces of holly ferns up to the office one time, and he said, are you any good at recognizing diseases and insects? And I said, well, fairly good. So what do you have? And he pulled these out of his bag, and he showed me the back of them, and they had all those dots on the back. And he said, I can't figure out what kind of disease or insect this is. And I said, well, and he said he'd scrubbed them and he'd done everything he could do, and you steal wool on them. And I said, well, I hate to tell you, but that's the natural part of that plant. It's spore. That's how they reproduce. I said, if they cut them all off or scrub them all off, number one, you can't. But even if you could, you're not going to have any new ones coming up. And he kind of turned red and he got embarrassed. And he said, oh, my bad. So anyway, fun story. The Possum holly we talked about is great, until the cedar waxwings find them. They come in and clean them off real quick. Yaupon holly, always fun with the Latin name, Ilex vomitoria. It was used by the Native Americans for a cleansing ritual. So they'd pop a few berries in their mouth and eat them and use it to cleanse their system. And that's why they call it Ilex vomitoria. So a little piece of trivia. But here's the weeping one. They got the round ones. They have the tall cylindrical ones. Several different types, so they can really be fun, both male and female. Cuba is a great plant. Takes almost total shade. It's one of our few plants that will take almost complete shade. It's almost like a closet. But yet it gives you brilliant colors. And if you get the females and you keep them in there long enough, they'll have wonderful berries. So it can be a fun plant. But as you see, it's covered in snow and it has no problem whatsoever with it. There's the gold dust, the Cuba. They have several different ones like that give you, look like somebody spilt a lot of gold paint all over it. Coral berries are a beautiful plant. It's easy to find out why they named them coral berries. They have berries that are coral. They can cover a lot of area. They have a nice arching look to them. Great plant. If you use it in the right place, you'll enjoy it. Winter honeysuckle, one of the few honeysuckles that we do recommend. You can have a lot of fun with that. Nice little flowers and the foliage color. Mahonia, there's so many Mahonias out there that hardly anybody uses anymore. The leatherleaf Mahonia there on the right. There's just a number of them that just do really well. They'll take shade, they'll take some sun. They give you drupes of berries, they give you flowers. It's kind of a prehistoric looking plant, I think, the way it's shaped. There's the drupes of berries on them. They're kind of a greenish purple. And then in the fall, they really turn pretty. And then they have some newer varieties that come out yellow. Winter jasmine, it's one of the first to come out in the spring. It has a nice arching, graceful look, and comes out with bare stems, and then has the yellow flowers that covers it, and then comes out later in green. Purple winter creeper, another fantastic ground cover. It'll take any kind of abuse you can give it almost. Wonderful fall color. It's green all year, and then in the fall turns that brilliant purple. So it's a really good combination against the dark green hollies. There's sometimes, in the winter, if it gets really bit back, it'll burn a little bit, but you just give it a trim and it comes right back, and you don't have to worry about it. Flowering quince is another fun plant. It's a lot of people don't think about it, but it's kind of one of the first other flowering that comes out, and it has fruit. It has to be in there several years before it gets old enough to produce fruit. But the quince fruit is a neat little orangish yellow fruit that kind of has dimples in it, that makes really good jam. But the neat thing I like about the quince is that you can, in the spring, it'll come out with just a bare stem with buds on it. You can trim some of the stems back, bring them in the house, put them in a vase full of water, and they will go ahead and bud out and flower, and then you have a wonderful fragrance. And there's very few plants that actually do that. So the quince is another fun one that'll take almost any kind of abuse you can give it. Here's a close-up of the flower. Forsythia, bright yellow, comes out early in the spring. Big, tall, willowy shrub. They can get 6, 8, 10, 12 feet tall, and just brilliant. So that's just a few neat, fun plants that do well, but then, we can't leave out, we talked about shrubs, we talked about annuals and perennials and everything. We've got to talk about a few trees. So I had to give you a few of my favorites. The Chinese pistache, great tree. You might if you're going to consider planting a tree in our area, it's very hard wood. It doesn't break up in the storms very much. Very few pests. Wonderful fall color. You can see it anywhere from reds to oranges. And then it has a male and a female. The male obviously doesn't put berries on. The female does. And when she does, she'll put on berries that are greens and golds and reds and burgundies. So they're very, very colorful. Shumard red oak. Quercus shumardi, it doesn't like wet feet, so you don't want to plant it in the low area. But other than that, it does extremely well. We're seeing a few that got bit back a little bit by the frost, but they're coming right back out, so no need to worry about those. But beautiful, beautiful fall color. Shantung maple. If you want a tree that will do extremely well in West Texas or in North Central Texas, that'll be 25, 26, 28 feet tall. Consider the Shantung maple. They have beautiful fall color, anywhere from the yellows to the oranges to the reds. We have a wonderful nursery here in Fort Worth. It's called Metro Maples, and they actually breed the Shantung maple. So if you've not ever had a chance to go see them, look it up. It's right off of 20, and I believe England, and they sell their own variety of Shantungs. They're a wonderful tree. Take all the abuse you can give it. It takes virtually no water. Years and years ago, when I was still in Wichita Falls, we trialed the new Shantung maples, a new plant we wanted to make a Texas superstar. But at that time, if you got into West Texas, you couldn't grow maples. There wasn't anything that would survive the heat. So I took one and planted it in Wichita Falls at the Impact Center, which is the multi-purpose event center, and planted it in a garden, right, and probably the worst soil I've ever seen. And I planted it on 6 feet away from a south-southwest facing 2-story brick wall. Now, if you've ever been to Wichita Falls, you know it's hot. And if you got the south-southwest exposure with a brick wall 6 feet away, you can't get much hotter than that. Planted that tree, watered it a few times the first month or two to get it established. Never watered it again. It was a small 5-gallon plant that was, no bigger than your little finger and about 4 feet tall. Within 5 years, that plant, no additional fertilizer, no additional water, no nothing, and got close to that wall, was over 18 feet tall. So, in beautiful, beautiful, beautiful fall color. So it was strongly recommended. That's why we made it a Texas superstar. And again, they all are varied. Some will be red, some will be yellow, some will be orange, and in combination between. The Fire Dragon is the one that they do at Metro Maples, which is just, it looks like fire. Ginkgo biloba, another fun one. They have a green one and a yellow one like this, or a gold. And it's as far as what we can figure out, it's the oldest tree known to man, because they have found fossils, from the dinosaur ages, where the same leaf was fossilized in with the dinosaur remains. Fun tree, interesting leaf shape. There's nothing else like it. And the interesting piece of trivia is that if you've ever been around a mature gold or mature ginkgo in the fall, that'll be up one day, it'll be full, and then the next day you'll walk out and it dropped every leaf on the tree all at one time. So it makes it easy to clean up because they all drop at the same time. But that's the one, the ginkgo is the one that they do some of the supplements for memory and things with. So it's a neat, fun tree. The Natchez crepe myrtle is a wonderful fall color foliage, a beautiful, beautiful trunk on it. Natchez is white, and it'll be 20, 25 feet tall, gorgeous tree. Every time we talk about crepe myrtles, especially the last few years, we're seeing a lot of the crepe myrtle bark scale and the giant crepe myrtle bark scale. The lady beetles can help, but they can't keep up with it. So Bayer makes it one, and several of the other manufacturers make one, but it's simply something that you apply to the soil, and it pulls it up into the tree, so that when the scale is actually feeding on the inside of the tree, it'll pull it up, and it'll help control it. So that's one great way to do it. It's a 12-month tree and feed, shrub, protect and feed. Cedar elms, great little tree, yellow fall color, survives through just about anything. Little bitty small leaf, the leaf's not a whole lot bigger than your thumb. So it's kind of a neat tree. Japanese maples, if you've got, you got some shaded areas, they're a true understory tree. And you can see here all the different colors they have during the fall. Pinks and roses and burgundies and everything you can think of. There's some leopard plant there. There's all kinds of fun things growing on. The big holly and a magnolia. But if you got to have shade, don't make the mistake of putting them out in full sun, because they'll just simply burn up. But here's some close-ups of them, of the different leaf structures and sizes and styles and colors. And if you're lucky enough to have shade, consider a Japanese maple. We don't recommend these, and I put those at the very end and to make sure that people realize that the American elm, the Bradford pear, and the sugar maple, they're just not a good tree, not suited for north central Texas. The American elm has the Dutch elm disease. The sugar maple has all kinds of other issues, and then the Bradford pear anytime you get the heavy snow and freeze, and about the time they get like that, then you'll end up coming out one day and a third of that tree fell off and just broke off. So we don't plant those, please. Consider one of these others that we talked about. Last but not least, good shrubs make for good neighbors. Have fun when you're gardening. That's the biggest thing that we want to make sure people understand. Again, for the last piece of trivia, for the best garden, compost once, mulch forever. Simply keep 3 inches of mulch on your shrubs. Keep 3 inches of mulch around your trees, your annuals, your perennials, anything that you've got, and you'll dramatically make a difference in the amount of water, the amount of fertilizers, and the beauty that you have growing. So just keep on top dressing with compost, or the mulch, and you'll be in good shape. So, any questions? I hope that kind of helped you. Talked a little bit about the freeze, talked about some of the different types of plants, gave you some ideas of things to consider. So if you have some questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and then Nancy or one of the people will read them out to us.
We will. So Steve, one question is, what is the white stringy stuff that's on the underside of mulch?
On the other side of mulch?
Underside of mulch.
It's actually a fungus. It's a beneficial fungus. It helps to break down the mulch and break it down into compost. Most of it is, I guess the easiest way is when we have a root system, and you'll see it, if you see it underneath the mulch, you'll see it. If you dug up a plant, you'll see it there. But if your root system of your plant looks like this, then the fungus grows in here and attaches and will double and triple your root structure size. So don't worry about it. It's a good thing. If anything, it might be telling you you're watering a little too much, but it's very beneficial. If it becomes an issue and you just simply don't like it, sometimes you'll have an area where it breaks down and too much, and it'll make it hard. You can just scrape that little bit of it off and just simply apply some more mulch to it.
Okay. Next question is, what brand pre-emergent do you recommend?
Oh, there's not necessarily a good brand or a bad brand. You want to simply look to see what there's several manufacturers out there. Most of them use the same major ingredient. So I'm trying. Dimension is one that does well. So just simply find one that has got at least a 6-month residual. And that's why we do Valentine's Day and Labor Day, because it's 6 months apart.
Someone had recommended Snapshot.
Yeah, it's great. Again, it's lots and lots of brands. It's like, do you use Phillips 66? Do you use Exxon? What brand of gasoline? A lot of it's just personal preference. A lot of it just depends on what they carry at the store that you shop at.
Next question is, do you have any recommendation for shade tolerant turf?
Okay, the easiest thing to tell you is that you have to go out in your turf areas to measure how much sun you're getting. If you have less than 2 hours of direct sun a day, you simply don't have enough sun to adequately grow turf on a long-term basis. And that's the deciding point. 2 hours or less, it's time to go to a ground cover. 2 hours or more, there are some, St. Augustine is going to be your most shade tolerant. They have some new ones coming out, new varieties of shade. St. Augustine that's being developed over at our Dallas Research Center. And that should be out in the next year or two. It's out commercially, but it's not out to the public yet, but you should see it in another year or so. But St. Augustine is going to be your most shade tolerant of all of the grasses.
Okay, so you may have just answered this question. Lori made the statement, I've read that zoysia requires more sunlight than St. Augustine. Is that true?
It does. We talk about a minimum of 2 hours for turf anyway. 2 to 3 hours is the minimum for St. Augustine. 3 to 4 hours is the minimal for zoysia. And then 5 to 6 hours is the minimum for most of your Bermuda.
Okay.
So 2 to 3, 3 to 4, and then 5 to 6.
The next question is, will Turk's cap trellis?
Yes.
Okay.
It takes a little bit more work because it tends to be a wild growth, but I've seen it actually on a small trellis or that's very close together, having them go up and out of the trellis.
Right. Do you have a recommendation for the best bark mulch?
That's a good question. What we recommend, and most of the horticulturists throughout the United States will recommend the same thing, is if possible, try to find a bark mulch that is conducive to your area. If you go to Tyler, they have a tremendous amount of pine trees, so they use a lot of pine straw there. If you come over into Fort Worth area in north central Texas, most of our trees are going to be hardwood, so we suggest hardwood mulch. Cypress mulch works, is kind of the in-between, works just about anywhere. Cedar works, because we do have some cedars, especially if you go farther up north into Oklahoma. We use a lot of cedar mulch up there because, the pastures are full of cedars. So, if I was going to pick one, I would say for our area, I'd say a good hardwood mulch. Most of them are going to be a real dark brown, or some of them even black. They have all of the nutrients and all of the things necessary to grow that type of plant, which is what we have here.
Do you have an opinion? I'm just asking this. Do you have an opinion about those colored mulches that are in bags?
The color mulches, there's nothing wrong with them. But if you ever put them out, you pay extra for them in most cases. If you put them out, it's just simply a hardwood mulch that's dyed. And so they've dyed it a red or dyed it a brown or dyed it black or whatever it may be. That it's like any dye that fades out in a year. So then you're back to just a kind of a light brown, faded looking mulch. So, if you like bright colors, then there's not a thing wrong with them. But it doesn't do any benefit over just the regular mulch.
Okay. The next one is kind of a statement about this person sees lots of ads and newsletters recommending use of native plants, top 100 for North Texas superstars. They'd very much like to plant them, but having a hard time finding a vendor. Would you make some recommendations on where to find those native?
Yeah, that's a good question. Native plants are wonderful. They're native to our area. They've been here a long time. They take very little care. The problem is that they're not always as showy as some of the other type plants that are brought in from other countries. And so people are not as knowledgeable about them, and so they don't buy as many, so the nurseries don't carry as many. There are the Native Plant Society here in North Texas Native Plant Society. Generally will have a couple of plant sales a year that they do a wonderful job with. A few of the nurseries are starting to carry a few more native plants. Some of the smaller ones do a really good job. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of places that you can go and just get a huge selection. So what I would suggest is any place that has anybody that you know of that has a native plant, see if you can make some cuttings. Ask them. Do a little plant propagation. Share with your neighbors. If you've got a native plant and they've got a native plant, find out how to propagate them and share with each other. And enough people doing that, then you'll start to see a lot more native plants out there. More people use them, the more they'll go to the nurseries and ask for them, and the more the nurseries then will start carrying them.
Right. Sorry, my printer's going off behind me. Someone has listed Weston Gardens and Archie's. They carry native plants. Is it Stewart's out Weatherford?
Yeah,
It does.
all of those places do a really good job. Even Callaway's and some of those are starting to do native seed.
Just encourage those local nurseries to carry those native plants.
Sure.
I'm starting to even see more in the big box stores.
Yeah.
Next person is asking, can you recommend an easy, low maintenance shrub?
Well, it all depends if you want a flowering shrub or a foliage color. You see more of your foliage color being in the shaded areas because, in order for a shrub to flower well, especially a brilliant flower, you need a minimum of 4 to 5 hours of sunlight. So if you happen to be less, then you need to stay in foliage color. If you want flowering, and you have enough sun, you can go there. We used to say roses were the easiest to grow, and they were until we got rose rosette. For the shaded areas, I think you've got your mahonias. You've got a lot of foliage color in cast iron plants and variegated gingers, the Cuba, those kinds of things. If you've got more sun, then probably the number one choice would be one of the salvias. There are over 800 varieties of salvias. And if you go back east to northeast part of the country, there's a lot of people that have nothing but salvia gardens. And because with 800 varieties, you got choices of salvias that are 6 inches tall, and you got choices of salvias that are 10 feet tall. So sunlight, I would go, if I was going to have to pick one, I would go something in one of the salvias. And then that would the big thing in there would be, what color flower do you like? Do you like red or pink or white or blue or purple or whatever, or a combination of all of them?
Okay. The next one, this person wants to know, is Virginia creeper invasive in our area?
It can be. It has the potential of growing 30 or 40 feet long, and it can get carried away if you're not careful with it. It's kind of like the Nandinas with the berries. Virginia creeper does put out some berries as well once it's mature, and so that can be an issue. So if you stay on top of it, it's not too invasive. If you let it go and not careful, yes, it can be.
Will butterfly bush trellis?
Trellis?
Mm-hmm.
Depends on which one, what you're considering a butterfly bush. There are the buddleias that are considered butterfly bushes, and then there are some that are actually called a butterfly bush. So there's actually several different varieties there. They can be made to trellis. Most of them are a little bit wilder open growth, because in that way they can attract the butterflies into them. So it takes a little bit more work, but yes, anything can be made to trellis if you have the time and energy to train it.
Someone also wants to know if you think that butterfly bush will come back after the freeze.
I would, again, patience. I have a butterfly bush. I'm looking out the window at it now. That was in a large pot. I did cover it. The top is completely dead, but it's greening up and coming back from the root structure. So I'm not going to get rid of it yet. I think it's going to come back. And I think most of them will, unless it just really was bad, or if they were in the ground and they were mulched, then the root structure should be strong enough to come back.
The next one, I think there was one more. This one, I'm not sure how to state it. It says stone rocks over mulch to prevent weed. Is it recommended?
Okay. Stone rocks, are they better for mulch? It's hard to answer that question. It depends on how you look at it. If you have a soil, plants planted in a soil, and you mulch over with a organic type mulch, wood mulch or whatever it may be, and you got 3 inches, the benefit of that is it shades the ground enough so that you have very few weed seeds germinate. If I do the same thing, the same soil and the same plant, and I mulch over with 2 or 3 inches of rock, it doesn't give you the same benefits. The rock obviously doesn't break down and give you nutrients. It doesn't keep the temperature low as the mulch does. It's got bigger open areas so that the weed seeds every day that we go outside, there are minuscule weed seeds blowing all over everywhere. So they have a tendency to fall into those cracks and actually can have more, in some instances, more weeds. And they're a little harder to take care of. If you're going to have a rock garden, and you put down some type of landscape fabric and cover it in rock, that works somewhat better, but eventually the weeds will grow in, and then they penetrate their root system down through the landscape fabric, and then it's hard to ever get it out. So I would say, long-winded answer, but it's probably not a better mulch than the organic mulches, but it can be used.
Let's see, any plant recommendation for rock gardens in between the rocks?
Oh, it depends if you want big or tall. The salvias are going to work. Any of your succulents are going to work. I like it, a lot of the herbs, the prostrate rosemaries, the prostrate gosh, just drew a blank. The rosemaries, the thyme, any of the prostrate growing type herbs do really well because if you let them bolt, they will flower. And if you happen to walk on them, they'll crush, you'll get the aroma. The succulents, any of the small salvias, bulbs, the small ground cover nandinas, a lot of people you're seeing now are using the yuccas, that have the flowers growing out of them. So it's kind of up to you on what type of plant material you like. Ornamental grasses are great for that.
All right, this next question is what to plant? My Indian hawthorn are all dead.
I would definitely stay away from Indian hawthorns. We have a lot of issues with them. They are not well suited for the cold, obviously. And I doubt there's any Indian hawthorns unless they were just very protected that are still alive. If you decide to plant back, don't put them in groups because they have leaf spot disease. I would go with again one of the salvias in place of it, or a group of different types of salvias to give you different colors instead of the Indian hawthorn.
Okay, I do not see any other new questions. I guess if you want to stop share, Steve, and does anybody else have another question that you can either type in or you can unmute and ask Steve directly? Now they're all quiet. So
now they're all quiet.
I did put in the chat box that your presentation was recorded, and we will upload it to Tarrant County Master Gardener YouTube site for public view. And then I believe it'll also be available on the Tarrant Regional Water District site probably within a few days as well.
Right. And so, the nice thing on the Tarrant Regional Water site and then obviously on the Master Gardener site, if you email them with questions, they can forward it to me and I'll be glad to try to answer the questions for you. one thing I will tell you is if you haven't, is to tune into Neil Sperry's website. He does wonderful. He's been doing almost updated daily on the freeze damages and stuff. He has, he's the dean of horticulture for Texas, so he has a wonderful, wonderful knowledge and things to share with you on just about everything.
And just to let y'all know, we Tarrant Regional Water District has some more presentations coming up, and you can look at those on their website. Tarrant County Master Gardeners also have some presentations coming up. Tomorrow is one on insects, and then we'll have one on basic landscape horticulture and also on native and adapted grasses. So you can find out how to register for those classes. Ours are all free on the tarrantmg.org website, or look up, just Google Tarrant County Master Gardeners. So we'd encourage you to learn more. We're glad that you've joined us. And Steve, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Remind them where the demo garden is so they can all come out and see it.
Yes. If you're interested in seeing how plants and grasses and trees all grow in this area, as Steve mentioned, it sits on a limestone ledge with very little soil. It is at the resource connection of Tarrant County. If those of you have been in Fort Worth or around Fort Worth for a long time, it was the old state school. It is located down just north of 820 off of Campus Drive, near the TCC campus down there, and you go into the Tarrant or the resource connection. Some of you may have gotten your shot over there. There is a road that goes around the cluster of buildings called Circle Drive, and the garden is right next door to 1801 Circle Drive. So if you just put 1801 Circle Drive, Fort Worth, into your GPS, it will take you to the garden. And Steve has said it's just over 2 acres, and it is fabulous.
And then while you're there at the garden, you can go right on out to Western Gardens. It's just a few blocks away. You can go to Metro Maples and Steagles and a lot of really great nurseries that are all within just a few miles of there.
Great.
Thank you, Steve. It was a great presentation.
Thank you. I enjoyed it, and I'm glad you did too.
All right. If we don't have any other questions, I think we'll log off for the evening.
All right. Thanks, Nancy.
You are very welcome. Thank you, everyone. We hope to see you again at another presentation. Have a good
Thanks,
evening.
Steve.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Thank you.
Steve, would you like a copy of this presentation, or I'll just send you the link once we put it up on YouTube? I can send you the link.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. All
All
right.
right. Well, have a great evening.
Okay. Appreciate you. We hope to see you at some of our presentations or meetings.
Well, I hope so now that you're going to send me the list.
There you go. We'll send you this, send you some links.
All right. Bye.
Everyone have a good evening.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for joining us.